Hey everybody, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to share with you guys my perspective on inverted chords, specifically focusing on how they work within music, the advantages behind them, and how we can use them in chord progressions. So without further ado then, let's get started. Okay, so for me, amongst a number of other things, there are two really key reasons why we want to use inversions. First off, inversions offer a more physically economic way of playing, and second, they lead to better voice leading and connectivity between your lines. So on the first point of economy, consider the idea of using root position chords in a chord progression. When we do this, we'll be forced to jump around. For example, let's say we have a progression in D major that goes 1, 4, 3, 5, or D major 7, G major 7, F sharp minor 7, and A7. If I play these chords in root position, no matter what voicings I choose, I'll be forced to have to jump around the neck to get these sounds. For example, we could play D major 7 like this, G major 7, F sharp minor 7, and A7, and if I voiced it differently, I would maybe have something like this. But in both cases, I was forced to jump around the neck in a number of different ways. So if we want to clean this up and eliminate some of the jumps, we can apply our inversion theory to create some new voicings that are a little more economic to play. All right, so let's try this out using the same progression, and we're going to start with that D major 7 in root position that we had before. So for the next chord, G major 7, spelled G, B, D, F sharp, we want to find a voicing that's a little closer than some of these root position voicings that we used earlier where we had to leap. So when you're thinking about an inverted chord to use, the most important thing that you can do is to think about the tones within that chord that you're planning to jump to. So in this case, as I said before, G major 7 has the notes G, B, D, and F sharp. And when you're thinking about inversions, you want to think of those chord tones in relation to bass notes, as the bass note will help us to determine which chord is going to be the closest by from an economic standpoint. In this case, our first chord had the note D in the bass, and if we look at the G major 7, we'll notice that the G major 7's fifth is also the note D. So we can attempt to build a G major 7 chord with the fifth in the bass, which is also known as second inversion. And if we do that, we'll get a shape like that. So moving from our first two chords then, we have D major 7 and G major 7. And as a side tip, when you're playing with inversions, a nice thing to do is to keep some common tones or change as little of the tones between the chords as possible, as that creates a really flowing and seamless sound. So in this case, we kept the F sharp in the same spot and we kept the D in the same spot. And we just shifted a few of the other tones over. Anyways, moving on, we can move on to our next chord, which is the F sharp minor 7 chord. So once again, we want to think about the tones within an F sharp minor 7 chord and see how they relate economically, or how they relate in terms of position to the bass notes that we just used. So an F sharp minor chord has the notes F sharp, A, G sharp, and E. And in this case, the closest bass note to the D that we've been using is this E right here. So we can use the E as the seventh of the F sharp minor chord, and we can build an F sharp minor chord with the E in the bass, or an F sharp minor chord in its third inversion. And if we do that, we'll get this sound here. So maybe just as an example, you can hear root position, third inversion. Very similar sound, but in a much closer spot for us to play. So if we cycle through all the chords then, we'll have D major 7, G major 7 over D, and then F sharp minor 7 over E. So for the last chord, the A7, we can once again think about the tones in that chord. So we have A, C sharp, E, and G. And fortunately for us, the fifth also happens to be the same bass note that, once again, for us, the fifth happens to be the same note that we're already using the bass for the F sharp minor 7 chord. So we can keep that note the same, and we can just slightly modify this here so that we have that G note, and now we have an A7 chord. So in this case, this is an A7 in its second inversion. So finally, if we run through the progression one more time using these new, more economic inverted voicings, we'll have something like this. Okay, so that's economy, and I recommend that you guys give this a go with your own progressions. And for extra practice, something you can try too is to take some pre-existing progressions from other songs and try to play them with different voicings using these inverted chords. Okay, closely related to the concept of economy is the idea of voice leading, which is an idea taken from choral music where we consider the motion of individual lines and their smoothness. Typically, a line will be easier to sing and process if it has less leaps. So we can think about voice leading then as an explanation for why chord progressions using inversions sound good. It's analogous to writing music that's easy to sing. To illustrate this then, here are two examples that use inversions and nice voice leading. Pay attention to the subtle movement of the voices between each string and chord. For the first example, we have an A major 7, going to a D major 7, going to a B minor 7, and then finally a G minor 7 flat 5. Once again, just pay attention to the voices and how they sound. And for the next example, we're going to go from an F major 9 to a C add 9 over E, back to an F major 9, and then finally to a C major triad over E. So once again, F major 9, C add 9, F major 9, and C over E. Anyways, moving on, another great thing about this inversion idea is I can use it to get more interesting root motion or bass lines within my chord progressions. For example, I can use inversions to actually get a stepwise completed major scale through the use of just two chords. So let me show you this example here. So we're going to use the chords G major 7 and A minor 7. And I'm going to use inversions to create a bass line that goes all the way through the scale just using these two chord sounds. So we can start on G major 7 in root position, A minor 7 in root position, then we have G major 7 in its first inversion, followed by A minor 7 in its first inversion, and then we have G major 7 in its second inversion, followed by A minor 7 in its second inversion, and then we have G major 7 in its third inversion, and then back to the root. So yeah, that's another cool thing about these inverted chords is we can use them to create cool bass lines and more interesting root motion. Alright, as one last tidbit, I want to talk about one of my favorite conceptual applications for using inverted chords. And this is the idea that we can use inversions to get multiple chord sounds that will exist within the same chord quality and tonality. So this is actually quite closely related to what I played at the end of the previous section where I got a bunch of different chord sounds for roughly 2 chords. So in this example then, we're going to look at playing over a single chord, and we're going to explore how inversions can allow us to get multiple chord shapes that will roughly fit this same sound, or we'll use the exact same notes but with just a different look and orientation and ultimately color. So for example, say we're playing in a situation where we just have a C minor 11 going in the background. Using inversions, we can invert the C minor 11 chord to create a bunch of different new shapes that we can play over top of this sound to add some new color and freshness. And obviously that would be a lot less static than just playing the same root position C minor 11 shape over and over again. So as an example, I'll play a bunch of different sounds that are closely associated to C minor 11s and C minor 9s using inversions of these chords just to eke out some different colors. Here we go. Yeah, so that's the C minor 11 sound. And once again, all I was doing was exploring the tonality using inversions of a C minor 11 chord. Alright folks, so there you have it. If you like this video, then please make sure to like, share, and subscribe as I put out a new video every single week. And if you want to support the channel, then please consider checking out my Patreon page, where for as little as $1 a month, you guys will have access to some bonus content like guitar tabs, lesson notes, chord diagrams, and other little goodies like that. And honestly, the Patreon page really helps me out as it allows me to get some extra equipment to make these videos better. And finally, I also teach privately through Skype. There's a link to my email address in the description below. So thank you all for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.